What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the Fitness Stuff for Normal People podcast. I'm Tony.
And I'm Mariana.
And the fitness industry kind of sucks right now. It's become something built on really whatever drives clicks and sales at this point, and has just moved attention away from what actually matters. So we're not just trying to provide another fitness podcast, but actually act as a resource, giving you the knowledge and tools so you have the confidence in applying the best possible training and nutrition into your own life. Where today we are bringing you the top 10, 9 of the 10. We are bringing you the 10 training commandments. More specifically, the 10 rules that you need to be following if you have any hope of making meaningful progress in the gym. And if you're missing one or more of them, it could be one of the reasons why you've hit a plateau or stopped making progress altogether. One is all that it takes. These are the aspects that you need to dial in both inside and outside of the gym. This episode has been a long time coming. Before we get into that, though, y'all know how to make us smile. If you just take a quick minute while we're going through the rest, rate us 5 stars on whatever platform you are listening to us on. And if you're over on Spotify, you can actually give us a follow. So every single Monday when we drop a brand new episode, it pops right up so you don't miss a thing.
And if you want more after each episode, you can join us on Fitness Stuff Premium for just $5 a month, where you get bonus episodes every single Friday where we answer your own questions. You also get access to all of our complete 12-week training programs, including our Glute Growth Bible, Tony calls it, that we just dropped. Was that last week or 2 weeks ago?
It was last week, and it is freaking brutal. My glutes, like just sitting down, hurts right now because of yesterday's workout. It's brutal.
I think that's a good sign. You can get those and other sick perks like weekly Legion supplement giveaways, exclusive discounts for companies like Oura Ring, high-end blood work with Merrick Health, and so much more. You can sign up in the show notes below. Before we get into the episode, quick shout out as always to our sponsors from day one, Legion Athletics. All of their supplements are third-party tested. That's really, really important for us. They also are backed by a scientific review board, and they have a no questions asked money-back guarantee, which is great. Whenever you're trying a new protein powder, I find specifically, like, people get protective of their protein powders. They don't really like to steer away. So if you're trying something new, I feel like that is so worthwhile because you can see if it works for you, especially with supplements. So I really like that. Yeah, their pre-workout and their protein, always staples.
I almost never use the no questions asked money back guarantee on anything. It's so clutch when you're trying to supplement. Like it could be something as little as like you just didn't like the flavor, or the pre-workout didn't give you the feeling or pump that you want. It's like, yeah, I didn't like it. Okay.
Yeah.
Here's your money.
You can get 20% off your first order or double points on every order after that with the code FSPOD. We'll also leave the link in the show notes below. Commandments. We're getting holy today. Wait, I'm going to need a Diet Coke for this.
The FSPOD holy water.
My Diet holy Coke. Water. I actually just got sent a 32 pack of Poppy. Have you ever had Poppy? It's like Olipop, but it doesn't.
I haven't.
Taste a little different.
I've seen it because it has. It says what prebiotics and fiber on. I went Olipop because it doesn't Poppy not have.
Has less
much
fiber.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Is it good?
I really like it. I don't know if I like Olipop better because there is a difference to it that I can't really explain. Olipop definitely tastes more like a soda. Poppy, I would say it's not as harsh in terms of the flavor. If you want something that's a little bit more subtle, like sometimes people think Olipop is too artificial, or I think Poppy's a little bit more subtle.
I just do it for the fiber. That root beer flavor Olipop, don't touch it. As long as they don't touch that one, I'm good.
I'm trying to work with them again, but
they're blowing up. Okay, before we get in, because the 10 training commandments that we're going to talk about today, massively important. And it's one of those things. I use the analogy of a car engine all the time, even though I know very little about cars, so I could be missing the point completely. But it's so complicated where if one little piece is not working right, however many hundreds of pieces there are, if one piece isn't doing its job, it can completely stop the car from moving forward. It completely stops progress. And the same thing goes with these 10 rules, where all it takes is one or two of these that you could just not be paying attention to, and that's all it really takes to have you run straight into a plateau. And we did have a little fun with the names of these. We went a little biblical with it.
Are you gonna make me do this?
You don't
Tony.
have to. I named mine a little bit with the phrasing because I thought it was cute, but we don't have to. 10 rules. Which, before we get started, I forgot to tell you this. Have you ever looked yourself up on Reddit?
Oh my God, no. Why would I do that?
That's what I said. I was over on Reddit the other night just because there's this new Machine Gun Kelly song called Don't Let Me Go. And it has a really cool piano riff. And I've been learning the piano recently, and I wanted to learn those chords, but I couldn't figure it out. So I joined this piano learning Reddit club thing. I don't use Reddit that much, but I joined it just for this piano club that teaches you stuff about piano. I was like, hey, does anyone know these chords? And I was on there, and Karina's like, have you ever looked yourself up on Reddit? I'm like, I'm not
Dear
that
God.
narcissistic, but I'm like,
I feel like I
no,
wouldn't show up.
why would I do that? And that's what I said. She's like, oh, I have a couple times. There's some stuff on you. I'm like, why have you not told me this? And she's like, yeah, just search Train Bloom, like my Instagram handle. And oh my God, Reddit is the Wild West. You need to look yourself up after this. It is the funniest thing in the world. It was nothing terrible, but you realize when people are so anonymous, like Reddit is, I feel like, the most anonymous of anonymous platforms. So people will say anything. And I was almost hoping they would attack something else on me, but they were just like making fun of, remember that baby mic I used to use on my Instagram reels? Like a little Bluetooth mic? People were hating that I used that baby mic. They're like, this guy looks like a big effing baby, a giant adult toddler just holding this little microphone. I hate when he does this. And it was getting so many upvotes. It was just so funny. So you got to do that later.
I hate my life right now.
Did you?
Why did you tell me to do this? I'm gonna. Where are my antidepressants?
People are brutal on Reddit. So if you're out there listening, search yourself on Reddit. I double dare you. Anywho, the 10 Commandments. They're going to make this one into a movie too. Commandment number 1, thou shalt do the majority of your training lifting weights, but thou shalt not skip cardio. I think that's an important aspect. Thou shalt not skip cardio. Cardio is good for your heart, right? No doubt about it. It can also be a solid tool for fat loss if you use it correctly. Not something that should be relied on, but if you use it correctly, and I think most people forget this, it can even be helpful in building more muscle, which I think people forget. At least that's what I see. You never see people, at least on my side of social media, talking about how cardio can help you build muscle. Do you see that?
No, if anything, you see the opposite.
All the bros, right? If you step foot on a treadmill or stair climber,
you're going to lose all the gains.
Goodbye muscle. And it definitely can, right? It's not black and white. It's not black and white. But there's 3 actual big ways that it can actually help you build muscle. And I think people forget about this all the time. And I was a little naive or biased, and I would just kind of use these excuses to never add it in. But once I did, I saw much better recovery. It was the first one because it really improves muscle recovery. We talked about this in our complete recovery episode, but intense exercise causes damage to muscle fibers, which then need to be repaired. So when you're lifting weights, you're making that micro trauma, that micro tear to your muscle, and that needs to be repaired. And this is also, for those listening, this is usually what's attributed to DOMS, or that soreness that you get a day or two after your workouts. Now, the recovery of that damage is pretty complicated, but it's mostly regulated by 2 simple factors. How much of the nutrients needed for repair are brought to the damaged muscle over time, and the speed at which that waste or the waste products are removed from that muscle. Those are the 2 main factors that go into recovering that damage. And cardio is going to help your body repair muscle quicker because it increases blood flow to that area. Even if you just did a crazy bicep workout, doing some minutes on the Stairmaster or the treadmill, just getting your blood flowing. That was one of the most important pieces of our recovery episode. Remember that? It was movement. Get your body movement. And that's just going to flow those nutrients quicker and more to your muscle and help remove waste quicker. Overall, just helping you recover faster. And we know if you can recover faster, you can usually handle more training, and more training is going to help you build quicker. That's one of the biggest ways. The second way is that it improves your body's metabolic response to food. And this isn't, I wouldn't say, a complete game changer, but it's been interesting. It's one of my favorite things being diabetic, getting to wear like a CGM, continuous glucose monitor, to actually see how my body's response to different styles of training, different foods, things like this actually impacts how my blood sugar and blood glucose respond to different things. And in reality, this is what I'm talking about, the metabolic response to food. When we gain or lose weight, some people's bodies store less fat when they overeat, meaning they burn off more excess calories than storing them, and lose less muscle when they diet for weight loss, meaning more energy is sucked from fat than muscle to make up for that calorie deficit. Now, hormones like testosterone and like cortisol, they play the biggest role in this process, but our genetics have kind of set those at a pretty normal physiological range for the most part. But another factor is something called insulin sensitivity. And it's one that most people, I don't think, talk about correctly, but also, again, this is not a big rock to worry about. This is just how well your cells respond to insulin's signals. Insulin's very important for the muscle building process. People think it is this like demonic fat storing hormone, and it's not. We've talked about that before. But being insulin sensitive is highly beneficial when you're eating in a calorie surplus to build muscle. Being insulin sensitive when you're consuming more calories than you're burning. Where being insulin resistant is going to inhibit muscle growth and promote fat storage when you have overeating. So the more you're overeating, that can really determine how much more you're actually being able to give to your muscle compared to just store as excess fat. And that's something that you can much more control through things like cardio and lifestyle rather than testosterone or cortisol, things that are more genetically predisposed. So those are the biggest pieces in how it can really help in a bulk in the right amounts. But too much, we know, can be more harm than good. And even when it comes to fat loss, I mean, our recommendation is always about less than a third of your total training time. So if you spend 3 hours in the gym per week, at least 2 of them want to be coming from weight training. Less than 1 should be coming from cardio. That's for fat loss. I would say probably cut that in half when it comes to building muscle or if you're bulking. And although those things can help, I will add this little note here before we move on to commandment number 2, is if you're a hard gainer, meaning someone who feels like they cannot physically eat enough food in the day to gain weight to save their lives, which a lot of people are like, oh, tough problem. I think dudes, but there are definitely some girls that experience this too.
Oh, for sure.
Adding cardio in, I would say, is not worth those added benefits that we just talked about in that scenario, because all that's going to do is cause you to need more calories in your diet to be able to gain muscle. So if you're just increasing further how many calories you're burning a day, you don't need that if you're a hard gainer. So that's where I'd say the trade-off isn't quite worth it. But if you're trying to build up, and especially a lean build, not just like a dirty bulk or anything like that, adding in small structured pieces of cardio, 10 to 15 minutes after your lifts, can be so, so helpful. And I wish I would have implemented that in my life sooner. I wish I did. Did you like the name of that one? Thou shalt, all that. Did you like that? Should we stick with it?
It's great. I think it's fun.
Good. Me too. So that was training commandment number 1. Do you have anything you want to add to the number 1 before we get going on number 2?
I think just coming from a person who actually likes cardio, which is, I guess, weird. I don't like doing the same cardio every day. Like you can't, I'm not going to enjoy like going on the Stairmaster every day or like running on the treadmill. But I really love to get my heart rate up and do some sort of cardio like in my day. I have a lot of energy. I enjoy it. This isn't to say that that should be frowned upon. If you like it, this isn't to say that like you have to cut it out, or if it's more so if it is something you're doing more of than average, be cognizant of that in how you're refueling, in how you're resting, in how you're balancing it with your strength training. Just take more of it into consideration and take this factor into consideration, especially if it's stunting your goals and your progress. It doesn't mean you have to completely get rid of it or should really question why you're doing it if you love it, but you should maybe factor it in a bit more in terms of what your specific goals are, because it can.
That was a phenomenal note, Moses. I think Moses was with the 10 Commandments. Okay, we're gonna ditch the references.
Don't ask me. I can't remember the last time I've been to church.
Yeah, all these commandments or all these rules are generally aimed at optimal body composition and health improvements. That doesn't have to be your goal, right? We've talked about that. That's not my goal to have this optimal amount either. So if you love cardio, that's a phenomenal note to go into it. Now, number 2 is something that we've talked a lot about before, but
for sure.
We can't not mention it on this one, and it's going to be a little bit quicker. Commandment number 2 is to have a training program, not just to work out. I forgot my words, but that's the gist of it, because there's a difference between working out and training, right? Are you just working out or are you training? Most people are just working out, and that's why they're not making progress. To clarify, working out is when you just go to the gym, and let's pick a day, leg day, for example, and you just pick up whatever you're feeling that day, whatever exercises you're in the mood for, random sets, random reps, random rest times, and it's fun. but every single day is different. Today's leg day is different than the last leg day, which is different than the one before that. And you're just not going to make much progress, or I'll rephrase this one, and you're just not going to make it far past the beginner stage working out like this. Where training, on the other hand, is an intentional plan going into the gym aimed at your specific goal, where every exercise, set, rep, and workout builds on top of the last one, moving you closer to that goal. Hitting the same exercises this week as you did last week, just progressing small parts of each workout, like adding more weights, more reps, better form to make sure that you're hitting progressive overload like we talked about before. You have to have a little bit of structure if you expect to build anything on top of it. That's just the way things go. We've talked about that a lot before, and this doesn't mean you need to be on a structured training program, but you got to be, if you want to make it past the beginner stage. I don't want to say you 100% have to be tracking your workouts or on a program, but in my 10 years in this industry, I just rarely see someone break past into intermediate or past that who doesn't track their workouts, who isn't following some sort of program. I don't want to be absolute with it because there's going to be outliers, but that's just kind of how I see it. These classes like Orange Theory, Barry's Bootcamp, things that are like priding on like different, it's muscle, is it muscle confusion? Is that what they call it?
Muscle confusion? I've never heard of that.
I think that's like why they tout doing a different workout every single day is to confuse your muscle. You don't want your muscle to get used to the same thing. So you need to confuse it by doing new things. And it's like, yo, like your muscle doesn't have like neurons. You can't think. Your muscle can't think. It can't be confused. So when you continue to do it, it's like progressive overload, which we're going to talk about here in another commandment, is just progressively doing more. And it's so hard to, you can't guarantee that you're doing more if you're doing a different exercise. You can't tell if you're placing more tension on that muscle if you're doing something different every day. So that's commandment number 2, train. Don't just work out.
Yeah, I went through that phase where I needed to learn that. But
everybody does.
I kind of did it backwards because I really got into strength training when I was playing volleyball. And so I had a trainer and I had a set program written for me. So I felt from the beginning, I did that. And then I went through a phase where I kind of got sick of it and just did like whatever I wanted. And kind of knew in the back of my head that that wasn't going to be the best, but I was just doing it. And then I was like, this is not getting you anywhere. Like you need to go back to structure.
But that is kind of funny because most people do it in reverse. They start just working out, no structure, just kind of going in, doing the thing. Maybe they'll find something online, but even a lot of online programs I've seen are more about like what's flashy or exciting or fun rather than that's what sucks sometimes. It's like it can be boring. Like the structure can be boring. And if you don't want to take your physique past like the newbie to intermediate stages, you don't have to go hardcore into the boring style of training.
Yeah.
But it can get boring because you're doing the same movements week after week, but you're getting just incrementally bit by bit a little bit better. And it can be boring. I think you can find, and that's another episode, but find ways to restructure that in your head to be more motivating and exciting. But some people find it boring. But that's where it takes. What's number 3?
Is it my turn? Number 3. You're going to make me say it like.
You don't have to. You try it once.
Thou shalt train. Is it really shalt and not shall? Thou shalt train using progressive overload. Progressive overload.
I was like, I'm going to be honest. I don't know if it's shall or shalt.
Just go with it. But this is arguably, or is not even arguably, is the most important aspect of your training. We talk about it all the time, but the stricter definition of progressive overload is progressively applying more tension to your skeletal muscle over time, giving your muscle the stimulus it needs to adapt and become stronger or bigger over time. So in order for your muscle to get bigger and stronger, you must continually make them work harder than they are used to. Long story short. And this doesn't just mean lifting heavier weights. When most people I feel like are introduced to it, that's kind of the assumption, is to just lift heavier and heavier. But when you really think about that, take a step back, you can only lift so much. It's not like you can just keep increasing your weight forever. You can't. So there are other ways to apply progressive overload. This is by adding more tension. So really what you're trying to do is add more tension. You could do that by, yes, increasing the weight, but also by increasing the volume. So your sets and reps, your efficiency. So this could be like your range of motion or tempo. Tempo is my personal favorite because I don't lift the heaviest, and I'm like cool with that for certain lifts, certain bigger lifts. But if I am counting, doing like, I don't know, doing squats, if I'm doing squats and I hold it at the top for 2 seconds, and when I'm lowering, I'm coming down in the eccentric muscle contraction and counting to 3 instead of going right back down. So I'm adding more tension on that eccentric contraction. That's a form of progressive overload. Your rest time, even your frequency. So training throughout the week, and then intensity. So how close you're working towards failure or extending past technical failure with forced reps, negatives, drop sets, static holds, all that fun stuff that Tony is more keen on than I definitely am.
I'm a huge fan. Over the last year, I'd say I've become a bigger and bigger fan of tempo and efficiency as a form of progressive overload. Because I don't think many people realize this, and you nailed it perfectly. It's not just progressively adding more, it's more tension. So it doesn't just mean more weight. There's a lot of different ways to do it. But when you're slowing things down, you're working on your efficiency. And this is where we'll probably do a round robin at this at some point, but how the difference between like training for hypertrophy and strength have similarities and can overlap, but they're two different things. Like strength and hypertrophy or strength and size. That's why you can see someone who's like a skinny dude deadlifting 700 pounds and then a jacked Phil Heath bodybuilder deadlifting 500, which is still impressive. But you look at the two and you're like, this boulder over here should be able to lift a little bit more than that seemingly high school age kid.
Because size doesn't always equal more strength.
Exactly.
I feel like that's hard for people to wrap their heads around.
Well, especially for bigger movements like deadlifts, like squats, any like multi-joint movements that you're doing it, that mind muscle connection or getting the right motor recruitment, getting the right recruitment of muscle fiber in the right order in orchestra. It's a skill, like learning how to play the piano or a bike. People just don't see getting stronger as a skill. That's why I tell this story all the time, but it's been a while. When I was at my very peak bench up to 405, attempted, but failed. 395 is the top I got. But what made me that final climb after all these years of lifting, finally getting me past like the 315 to 350 era, all the way up to over almost 400, was slowing down, taking next to no days per week going to failure on bench press, and bench pressing 3 times per week. And one of those days was strictly just tempo and control. 3-second negative, 2-second pause, 1 second up with half of the normal weight. I was focusing on that skill. I was focusing on improving my actual movement. And that's where you get stronger. So that's why I'm like, so many people could benefit from an efficiency or tempo style of progression because it forces you to improve that connection. And then when you go back to something without tempo, you realize how much your strength jumps up. And that's easily the best way to apply more tension is by increasing weight if you're able to target the right muscle. But people forget about that.
Yeah.
And it's overrated because tempo hurts. Tempo,
it
like
does.
those 3-second negatives.
It does. And this made a huge difference for me in certain lifts because I'm limited in my range of motion with my shoulder. And just anytime you have an injury or issues with certain joints, I find tempo to be really helpful because sometimes that extra weight can really limit you in your form. So I'm like, for me on a barbell back squat, I am so limited in the weight that I can use because of my external rotation on my shoulder. But if I'm using tempo, I like, and changing that up, oh my goodness, it's such a great workout for me. Even though I'm not going to be adding that much weight, it's still good. And especially for me to be working my shoulder in that range of motion is still important.
That's a big one. And if you're a coach working with clients, I want to say it seems like a waste of time, but it doesn't seem as productive as lifting heavy weights or going close to failure, or even doing movements like a single leg deadlift where balance is so off. But as you improve that balance, you don't realize that your normal deadlift gets so much better. Start playing with that for the next few weeks and see if you can notice. I mean, you're going to suck at first with the tempo. If you do single arm, single leg movements, play with it for a few weeks and just watch how it translates to all of your other lifts and how the weights just start to increase and increase and increase like they haven't in a while. That's a good one. Commandment number 3. Should we move to number 4? Number four. Gym commandment number 4. Thou shalt leave thy ego at home. No, here's why ego lifting is the reason you've stopped making progress. When you let your form go just to lift heavier weights, 2 main things happen. And just for reference, ego lifting, that's when you're lifting more weight than you realistically can handle and your form goes out the window, everyone knows ego lifting when they see it. And some of it, I mean, you got to have it sometimes. It's hard to rein that in. But that's what we're talking about with ego lifting. First is that you're making the exercise less effective, not more, when you do this, which sounds almost counterintuitive. From a muscle engagement standpoint, because you're moving the tension from the muscle you're trying to target onto somewhere that you're not. Like when you arch your back to swing the weight up on a bicep curl, you're putting the tension that you want on your bicep onto your lower back, not where you want it. And that tension is what makes you grow. And this is where plateaus come from, or why you're not getting stronger past this point, because your muscle needs to be challenged more and more if it wants to grow. That's progressive overload. So when you think you're making the muscle work harder by lifting more weight than you probably should, you're actually doing the exact opposite. The muscle you're trying to grow isn't being challenged anymore. I'm going to say it is almost always better to go slow and under control with good form than to let your ego take control just to add a few more pounds. I struggle with this time and time again, but I know when I was younger and first getting into it, it kind of gets addicting to like lift heavier weights. So when you start hitting plateaus in strength, because newbie gains are a real thing. I can barely remember back to my newbie gains. Can you remember back to yours, like when you first got serious with weight training?
I mean, I actually can, because I was horrified. Because I can put on, like, I was really, really horrified because I can put on muscle pretty fast. Like, not even saying this in a weird way. I don't know. I haven't trained like I used to train when I played volleyball. My personal physique goals at this point in time are not to be swole, like not to be super muscular, but I can do it. And I remember I definitely had the newbie gains with it too. So
like
combined,
how quick you were jumping.
Yeah. And I was like, granted, it completely changed how I performed in volleyball. So I loved that. Once I stopped, I was like, holy shit. Like, this is crazy. But
in your first year or two in the gym of never having any real structure to weight training, it's almost every freaking week where some lift is getting stronger. Like bench press, going up 10 pounds every week you do it for 10, 20 weeks in a row. Squats, like everything you're doing is just getting stronger and stronger. So at the 1 or 2 year mark, when that slowly starts to come back down to a more normal pace, your brain is used to things needing to go up. Yeah. So after a few weeks of not increasing your weight, well, you're like, I've never gone 3 weeks without increasing weight again. Let me try this. And that's where ego lifting steps in. And you can usually muscle up a big movement at a heavier weight, not using the correct form or muscle group, but that's what you're doing to yourself. You're running yourself into a plateau over and over like while you're doing this. And you're just putting so much tension on the places that usually lead to injury, your lower back, your joints, your ligaments, things that if you're younger, you can usually bounce back from in a couple of weeks. But I mean, I've been plagued from stuff like that for months down the road. Yeah. You F up, you screw up your knee, your elbow, your shoulder. Oh, it just hangs there forever.
Yeah.
Unless you got that BPC 157. we should do a round robin on that one. That one's hot right now.
All right. Number 5, honor thy rest days.
See, that wasn't that bad.
Okay. This one, like, it really doesn't matter how hard you train. If your body can't recover properly, if you're not giving it enough rest, you will never make the progress you want to see. When it comes to fat loss, when it comes to building muscle, I feel like people don't appreciate it enough until they get older. Until you start to get older, you're like, wait, something's catching up to me. Like, my body, why does my back hurt all the time? Like, it is just something I feel like, and if you really consider this when you start lifting, like from the get-go, oh my God, your experience is going to be so much better. But there are a lot of things that you can do to not feel like, it's not saying just don't do anything. Like, have multiple days where you're not doing anything.
I feel like that's where people get, like, why they end up skipping rest days or working out more days than they should. Is because their brain just feels like they're going crazy. I mean, I felt like that at one point where I'm like, I just feel like an itch.
Same.
Like I'm irritable because I'm not working out right now. A lot of people feel like that.
And if you do feel like that, like I get itchy. Like, I totally understand that. You can add in movement, like just going for a walk, a few walks during the day. Tony was talking about how like cardio is still super important. It's going to increase your blood flow to the working muscles. It's going to be really important for recovery. Just adding in like 2 recovery days where you're doing that lighter movement, maybe it's lighter cardio, some mobility, you can have that active recovery. If time is not an issue, like if you still want to feel like you're going to the gym, like you can go have that active recovery day in the gym. It's still a form of rest. And it's also going to be good for strengthening your joints, especially adding in a mobility routine. We have how many do we
We
have
have
on our
3:
premium?
the lower
3.
back, hips, knees, and then shoulders.
Yeah. Yeah. 3. But I think an advantage to this too is like you don't need to be spending every single day in the gym, and you shouldn't be. So if you are someone who, I know we have a lot of people who maybe work full time, maybe you have kids, like maybe find some peace in the fact that like you don't need to be at the gym every day, and rest is important. But you really want to make sure to like you're not overtraining. So yeah, having that active recovery is important, but this almost like more is better approach can work until it doesn't. I feel like this is also can
It's like in
Tony's
every other
talking about with
aspect of
ego.
life. Like everywhere
Yeah.
else you work, like if we work harder on the podcast, we'll see better results. You work harder in your relationship, you see better results. Your job, what you know what I'm saying? Like every other aspect in life, the harder you work, the more you work, the better results.
Yeah. Overtraining is going to look a little bit different for everyone because it's the point in which your training exceeds your body's ability to recover from said training. So the results don't just stop moving you forward, they actually can push you backwards. And so again, depending on what level you're at, your body, like what you can handle, how you're eating, like there's so many different, this point is going to be different for everyone. But how much work you can handle is going to also depend on your recovery. Like if you're prioritizing it, like your body's going to be able, when you are in the gym, to do more. But you don't want to push your limits. And I feel like this can be something that can be hard to see because a lot of the signs and symptoms of overtraining can be from a lot of other things. But if you have, it's still something to consider. If you have even like 2 or 3 of these, look at, okay, how often am I training? Am I doing too much? But it could be if you're struggling to finish your workouts, if you're losing strength and endurance instead of building it, this is a huge tell-all of potentially overtraining.
Yeah.
If your sleep quality sucks, if you get fatigued and lethargic throughout the day, maybe your mood is down, you feel depressed, more anxious, you feel aches and pains, and maybe some small injuries start to pop up more often. And also a big one is getting sick more frequently because your immune system is being suppressed if you are overtraining.
People forget about that one.
Oh, I know.
Because isn't that where you got hit big time? When you
Yes.
felt like you were overtraining, was but you almost don't notice it because you never think, oh, I'm getting sick. Why do I keep getting sick? You never think it's because you're spending too much time in the gym.
Yeah,
That's
getting sick all the
like
time,
last
and
thought.
like the little soft tissue injuries, like those two for me. And also, I was just fatigued all the time, but I was not fueling properly either, which is another piece of recovery, which we're going to talk about next. But your body is going to tell you if you're overtraining. Like it all of these seem a little bit more general, but you'll know. Like it's if they keep popping up often and frequently, and if you are someone that is in the gym every single day, you're there for more than like doing more than you even need to be doing. If you are stressed about taking a day off, if that brings a lot of anxiety and you're experiencing these, that is very telling of if maybe overtraining is the reason why. And there's no shame in that. Like, as someone who used to be petrified of not going to the gym because I thought I would lose all my progress, or I thought, like, I don't know, you convince yourself that if you're not at the gym, everything is stunted. And
especially as a dude, you lose a pump after like one day. So you wake up the next morning that you haven't hit the gym yet. You're like, I legitimately changed my workout schedule from afternoons to nights in my early 20s. Or sorry, from afternoons to mornings because I didn't want to go through most of my day without a pump. It was so stupid. It was so freaking ridiculous.
You do stupid crap. Generally, like when overtraining happens is if you spend more than 6 hours of weight training per week. Again, that number could be a little bit less, a little bit more, but doing more than 20 hard sets. I don't really think, I feel like I used to go by that a little bit more with people, but now
I think it just like so much context goes
it
into it,
depends.
you know, where I'm like, just
Yeah.
based on two people's genetics and how much they've been training in the past and how well they're fueling themselves, you know, like if I cloned myself and one of my clones was eating in like a 10-20% calorie surplus, getting enough protein. The other one was in a deficit, maybe not getting as much protein. The one eating more could handle a lot more. And that's
Yes.
the hard part. And someone's genetics and their sleep and everything that goes into recovery, like really determines. Because
There's
that's, I
so
don't know
many.
about you, but I
Yeah.
get that question so many times, like, how many off days do I need per week? Do I
Yeah.
need one? Do I need two? Do I need three? I'm like, you could technically, if you manage your load and intensity well enough, you could theoretically build a 7 day a week program that gets you phenomenal results. The workouts are going
It
to be
depends.
short. You're not taking things to failure, but same thing in reverse. But that's where I'm like, that question can't really be answered, you
Yeah.
know?
Being really in tune with your body is going to be the biggest thing because you know your body best, and paying attention to that. And also, I feel like sleep is going to be huge. So, not recovering enough can affect your sleep. If you're not prioritizing recovery, that can affect your sleep. But also, if you're not prioritizing sleep, that can affect your performance as well. So it kind of goes both ways. But a decreased sleep can lead to less muscle mass and more fat gain during a bulk, more muscle mass loss and less fat loss during a cut, reduce performance in the gym, decrease growth hormone and testosterone, which is a huge one. And I feel like people don't really, it's not the first thing you think of. Yes, resting is important, but also your overall rest. Like, even if you're going to the gym multiple days a week, like when you're outside of it, what are you doing? Like, how often are you
That's,
sleeping? What's your sleep quality
yeah.
like? So,
That's where, I mean, in that recovery episode, we drilled in how important it was because you can handle so much more and make so much more progress if you dial in those aspects of recovery, because your body can just respond and handle so much more. Where another cool, I mean, for my Aura gang out there, if you got a little sleep tracker like Aura Ring, I forgot about this until now, but I was looking at it over with a friend a few months ago when he was doing 2 a day training sessions, which I almost never recommend. But I don't want to say never because there's always circumstances for certain athletic goals and certain, depending on how you actually
yeah.
structure the training. But he was doing 2 days in the freaking gym, and he was I mean, one, he was experiencing all the 7 things that you just mentioned up there. But a big one, if you have sleep data, is my guy was getting 2+ hours of deep sleep per night and less than 20 minutes of REM sleep per night. And if you haven't listened to our sleep episode yet, one, almost pause this and go listen. No, I'm just kidding. That was my favorite episode of all time. But think of deep and REM sleep, like the difference between those two is REM is more restorative for your mind and energy. Deep sleep is more tissue repair in your body, where you recover and release the most growth hormone when you recover from high intensity training. So, a big sign of this is if your body is spending so much time in deep sleep to where it's taking away from REM sleep, which should be at 60 to 90 plus minutes per night. If you're only getting 15, 20 minutes, he would get 3 minutes on some nights of REM sleep.
That's crazy.
And 2 hours of deep sleep. So, it's not like he was just up all night. That is a huge sign that your body is under recovered because it has to give every last resource during that reparative sleep process to repairing your body. And no wonder he was feeling fatigued and lethargic and all over the place, is because he was spending, I was laughing when I saw 3 minutes in REM sleep and 2 hours in deep sleep.
That's crazy.
But that's a big sign if you've got sleep data and you're like, maybe I'm not, or you're second guessing yourself if you're just being a baby, or if you are feeling fatigued. I call myself out like that all the time. But if you're spending way too much time in deep sleep, that is a huge sign that you're overtraining. So do it. Take your rest days. Honor thy rest days. Number 6, training commandment number 6. I'm going to sound like a mom or dad right now. Thou shalt not skip thy warm up. Don't skip it. I know you're in a rush. You had to drop the kit. Whatever. Don't skip it. Even if it's just 5 minutes. Your warm up does 2 main things. One, and this is not the sexy part about it, it reduces your risk of injury, which is important. The longevity of your training is important. But 2 is it actually increases your strength and performance during the actual workout, which will lead to more progress over time, right? An awesome review of research out of Melbourne, Australia, looked at 5 papers on the impact of warm-ups on injury risk. 3 of those 5 showed a big reduction in injury over time. And the other 2 studies were actually more focused on like static stretching rather than physically getting your blood flowing, warming your core body temperature up, really just showing that the single most aspect of a warm up is physically warming your body up, like getting your blood flowing. That's more important than any of these. I've delved deeper into mobility as I've gotten deeper into training and as I've gotten older, and it's important. But like, you don't need a 30-minute advanced mobility warm up every time you're going to work out. if you're in a rush, jump on the Stairmaster for 5 minutes just until you break a sweat. Like that's the first, like just until you break a sweat will be enough. Is it the best thing you could do? Probably not. You want to take your joints through an active full range of motion if you have time, do some more mobility drills. But if all you have is a few minutes, break a sweat, right? Like physically warming up. What were you saying?
Wait, I have a question. Side note. Okay, first question. Did you go to public high school? That's my first question.
I don't like where this is going. Yes, I did.
Yes. Okay. Same. PE in gym class. I don't know if this was just my school, but or if this is a universal experience. How long you would spend static stretching
the first
before
20 minutes of gym.
The first 20 minutes static stretching. So I always had gym first period because when I was on my medication for my anxiety and OCD, it made me very sleepy. So I had to take either a study hall or a gym first period. And I just have the most clear memory of me passing out cold during static stretching the whole time and my gym teacher kicking me to wake me up. I don't know. I thought about that, but it was so crazy to me. I was why are we doing this?
It was the first 20 minutes. I'm like, come on, I want to play freaking dodgeball, man. I'm a
Sorry,
peacock,
that
man.
was
You gotta let me fly.
Such an ADHD moment, but I think
that was an early
funny.
2000s elementary theme for sure. Public school theme for sure.
Public school thing.
Public school. But another review paper out of Switzerland actually lined up all the benefits from having just a higher body temperature in performance. So not even specifically talking about when we talked about our warm-up episode, when we built the perfect 3-step warm-up, taking your joints through the active range of motion. This is just simply getting your core body temperature up. That it, 1, increased muscle metabolism. 2, they saw better phosphocreatine and ATP utilization during weight training. All of this leading to meaningful increases in power output during said weight training. The compact, like this is where I think people forget about it. The compound effect is where progress is made. Who cares if you miss one workout? Look over the course of a year. How many workouts did you miss? That's how I'm going to tell if you made a good amount of progress or not. Not if you missed one here or there, or you had a bad week or whatever. The compounding effect is huge. So if you can stay healthy and not get injured, so you can train at a high intensity for months and years at a time without constantly being sidelined. I was guilty of that for a long time. And you can increase performance, even if it's just by 5 or 10% per workout. Do you realize the insane amount more progress that can lead to over the next few years? It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. So don't skip your warm-up, or thou shalt, whatever that was. Don't skip it. Even if you have a few minutes, if you got a little more time, listen to that warm-up routine. What do we got, number 7?
Oh, I love a Diet Coke. Okay. So thou shall fuel your body. So this goes really well too with the recovery piece. And I mean, fuel your body. It sounds so cliche. I feel like I hear people say that all the time, but the why behind it can really put this into perspective from when you're looking at from a training standpoint. So you have to understand what happens to your body during exercise and why this is so important. So your glycogen stores in your muscle and liver decrease, and they can even completely deplete during high intensity exercise. Proteins in your muscle get broken down and damaged, and fluid and electrolytes get lost in your sweat. So I like to think of the 4R's framework of nutritional strategies to optimize post-exercise recovery to address these pieces. So rehydrate, refuel, repair, and rest. So that's going to target these main goals of replenishing your glycogen, decreasing protein breakdown, and increasing protein synthesis. That's what you really want to be doing after working out, before working out, outside of the gym. You want to be prioritizing recovery through nutrition the whole time. This is what people don't think about. I'm not just talking about the 2-hour window after working out. I'm not just talking about your pre-workout meal. This is something you want to be prioritizing around the clock. So this comes from the what you're eating and also the how much. So really you want to, of course, be making sure you're eating enough protein. That's going to be the biggest piece because you want to make sure you're decreasing that protein breakdown. And you want to be, especially if you're trying to build muscle, you want to increase how much protein you're making. If you're not eating enough protein, it doesn't matter. I don't know if this is too extreme to say, let me know. Doesn't matter how hard you're working in the gym. If you're eating little to no protein, you're not going to get anywhere. I hate to break it to you.
I mean, that's even just protein, but it's like the whole like fuel as a whole, but protein more specifically. I mean, people,
Yeah.
I don't align with this, but you know how people are like, oh, it's 50% nutrition, 50% training. It's 75% nutrition. You know, when they give like arbitrary numbers and percentages to like how much of your progress is
Yeah, I can't.
training and how much. I don't love it because it's like, well, what about the recovery aspect? What about
Mm,
all the other things that go into it? But if we just boil it down to training and nutrition, like honestly, if you're trying to
nutrition.
change your body composition, not just maintain, but change your body composition to lose body fat, to gain muscle, to recomp, whatever. I mean, nutrition's got to easily be like 90%.
Oh,
Like
for
it's what
sure.
pushes you forward. Training's kind of giving you the stimulus. Nutrition is what pushes you in the direction you want to go.
Yeah.
It's insane.
Yeah. So we have a protein calculator on our website that you can go and use to get a gauge of how much protein you should be eating.
Mhm.
There's this protein debate of like the optimal window to be consuming protein. You really just need to be making sure in your day you're eating enough protein. Like that is the goal. But there isn't
Yeah.
really like a timing piece, unless if I would say from a fuel perspective, not from a protein perspective, but in terms
Mhm.
of your energy levels, like when you're eating meals within your workout, like that's going to make a difference for how you perform in the gym. But in terms of post exercise muscle recovery, that 2 hour, is it even the 2 hour window? It's been
It was the
changed
30-minute anabolic window is where it was when I was growing
oh,
up.
that.
The
Yes,
magic
yes, yes, that.
30-minute anabolic window. That's kind of a myth.
Which is, yeah. And we talk about that in our whole recovery episode. But protein, important. You guys know this by now if you've been listening. Carbs are also very, very important because they work with protein synergistically to increase the body's rate of glycogen storage. So carbs help amino acids, which are the building blocks of protein, get to muscle more quickly, promoting faster recovery and growth. I don't know why the hell that is not discussed more often, especially, the low carb, no carb
On the bro
is
side of
not
things, I
as,
think bros know. They almost take it
for sure.
too far where they're like, you need 50
You need your
grams
white rice.
of ambidextrine and this and all. You need 50
Yeah.
grams within to spike your insulin. That's overblown,
For
100%.
sure.
But carbs play a big role.
Yeah.
That's always my
So,
favorite thing is taking someone who's chronically been low carb for like most of their life and introducing carbs, even if their goal is to lose fat, if it's to build muscle, to recomp anything. And the shock after the first week, even of just how much more energy they have, how much more
yeah.
strength they have in the gym, how much quicker they're making progress. It's so funny to me. Like carbs
Yeah.
are such a hack. Such a
Yeah.
hack.
And I think I just want to note here quickly in terms of types of carbs, because there are your simple carbohydrates and your complex carbohydrates. And your complex carbohydrates are going to be most optimal after your workout because they're readily stored as glycogen and they're a slower releasing steady fuel source. So they also are going to take longer to digest. So that's typically why it's not going to be your quick energy source. So if you're looking for that, you would get that from your simple carbs, which are easier to digest and break down. That's why you'll see people having like a Rice Krispie treat during their workout or right before they go to the gym. That's going to give you that quicker energy.
It's
Or
helping them.
even yes, fruits like high sugar fruits like mango is one, or bananas or dried fruits. Those are going to be great for pre-workout, but you just don't want to be loading yourself right before the gym with a bunch of complex carbs because they're slower to digest. That can lead to a lot of
Probably to
GI
slow you down in the
distress
gym.
and slow you down a bit more. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So that's like the more nitty gritty, I would say. But as a whole, you also just want to be making sure you're eating enough, period. Because not just eating the right amount of foods for your fitness goals, but the right type of foods. Did I say amount?
Yeah, you said
Not
amount,
just
but I think the right
yeah,
types of foods.
not just eating the right types of foods, but the right amount of said food, because food is energy. It's pretty self-explanatory, but you'd be surprised how many people don't look at food this way, especially common in very low calorie diets, very restrictive, trendy diets. And it's funny, if you have goals to be putting on muscle, you can't do that without enough food. We talked about that in our glute growth episode.
Yeah, that's the biggest one is when females want to build glutes, but they're just
Not
living
even,
in a calorie deficit. It's like you
yeah.
need fuel if you want to positively change your composition.
And if you're not eating enough, also, it's going to be very much more difficult to make sure that you're getting a variety of your micronutrients. So a lot of micronutrients play a huge role in energy production. So how you're performing, how you're health is, how your immune system is functioning. So many factors come from getting those micros, your gut health. And I know people are so obsessed with macros, but this is a piece that I'm not even telling you which one to hone in on, but eating enough food is going to make sure you're meeting those micronutrient needs, and also eating a variety of those foods. So kind of eating in color, making sure you're getting veggies, fruits, whole foods, nutrition.
2024. Let's make that the year of the macros. Every year this so far has been the year of the macros. Let's make it the year of the micros. Right? Show me some color on your plate. Show me some of that. I was going to say, even I know this is almost, I get annoyed with myself when I say these things on the podcast, but we plug a lot of different episodes because a lot of fitness and your health, believe it or not, is context dependent. There's a lot of context that makes what's right for you different than what's right for me or Mariana or the person next to you. There's a lot of context. So I hate plugging and saying, like, check out this episode, the warm-up episode, the recovery episode. If you're wondering how to properly fuel yourself, determine what your goal is. And then I would say, honestly, if you have the time, listen to, like, if you're trying to build muscle, go listen to that lean bulk episode. If you're trying to lose fat, listen to the how to lose fat episode, where we go in depth on how exactly you should be fueling yourself correctly to make sure that happens. Because you're right. Like, it does sound cliche of just like fuel yourself, but at the end of the day, it's like, what does that mean? Yeah. And it's just different for everybody depending on the goal. This list is getting hot. I like it. It's heating up. It's not burning out. Number 8 commandment, thou shalt lift heavy enough to actually make progress. What? Tony, that's easy. That's simple. Listen.
At me.
You got to. You have to lift heavy enough. And I know some people are like, this may not pertain to them, like the ego, like maybe the ego lifters, this is the opposite problem. Mm-hmm. But a lot of people don't realize, and I'm even calling out, I'm not just saying people who are maybe newer to the gym. I don't want to just target either females too, myself included. Using the RPE scale is what we're going to talk about, to how to know exactly how much weight you should be lifting on each movement. Even if you're a dude who's jacked, who's been lifting for years, do an RPE edit on yourself the next week that you're in the gym. And I promise you, you're going to find several movements where you could be lifting significantly heavier that you're not by doing that audit, just because you get used to some things. You get used to the certain weights at certain things, how things feel. And sometimes you don't realize how much more you could be doing. So this isn't just targeting someone brand new or someone who's using the pink 5-pound dumbbells. This is everybody, myself included sometimes. Now, the stimulus that we're talking about here, there's kind of a sweet spot for the stimulus that's needed to cause a muscle to grow or to get stronger, right? Like we talk about progressive overload, applying more tension. You need to give your body stimulus that it can't quite currently handle comfortably. And that's why it needs to adapt and evolve and change to be able to handle that new stimulus. I mean, that's evolution from the very dawn of time. Funny conversation coming up that we're talking about this with the 10 commandments. But from the dawn of time and evolution, like that's just what's driven every aspect of evolution, is because some sort of factor, an environmental factor, a genetic factor, something has applied a new stress to a species that caused it to change to better handle that stress. We talked about this before. Said principle. Polar bears.
Specific adaptations to impose demands.
Chef's. We talked about polar bears. Polar bears weren't always white until they started going, bears just started going more and more toward the Arctic, started blending in more with their surroundings, the white needing thicker coats, causing them to evolve and change. That's what progressive overload essentially is. You're giving your body a stress, a stimulus. That's why people call it a good stress. They're like, oh, working out, it's a good stress. You're applying a stress to your body to signal that it needs to get stronger or better in some aspect to be able to handle that in the future. That's what you're doing. So if you're lifting weights that are just way too light that your body can already comfortably handle, it has no reason to change to handle heavier weights. You're never going to make progress that way. And that's the hard part. So where is this sweet spot exactly? Now, again, I hate to do it. We'll try and tag all these episodes down below, but in a round robin, we did a deep dive in the RPE scale, which is essentially a scale of 1 to 10, basically just asking you how hard your set was based on the weight that you used. 10 being your absolute max effort, meaning you couldn't lift another pound if your life depended on it, all the way down to 1 being little to no effort, right? Being you could feed your baby while lifting this much weight. And then based on the score you give yourself, you're either going to increase, decrease, or keep that weight the same for the next set. Now, the way that you want to look at this is landing somewhere between, and I know this is a hot argument up for debate, but somewhere between an RPE of 7 to 10 is usually the stimulus you're going to need to attribute like growth. And in simplified terms, what that means, like what is the scale? What does a 7 mean? It's measured by counting how many reps you have in reserve at the end of your set. Meaning if I do, let's say, lat pull downs, and I'm using 120 pounds and I do 10 reps and I rack the weight, I just ask myself, how many more reps could I have done before I had to just hit failure, right? If my life was on the line, that would mean I would want to aim for between 0 and 3 reps left in my tank. That would be a weight that's considered heavy enough. But if I'm like, you know what, I could have done 5 or 6 more, that would mean I should increase my weight for the next set to where I get to that point where I could only handle a couple more reps if my life was on the line. And it's a super big, and that's why we use it in all of our training programs with RPE set goals and how we actually implement that in progressive overload. Such a massive tool you can use. I would say if you're like an intermediate-ish lifter and you really want to take it to the next level, this is the easiest, lowest hanging fruit you could focus on in your training, is starting to implement and use the RPE scale, which you could listen to that episode for more detail. But you got to lift heavy enough or you just don't have reason to change. We talked about that last week in the glute episode. Like ladies, especially, I see this. I'm not targeting everyone, but ladies, sometimes guys too. We were talking about glute growth. Look at your legs. They're massive. I don't care if you're brand new to the gym, like your legs have muscle on them. That can handle more than a 20-pound dumbbell if you're doing squats. Probably closer to 50 plus, even if you're just walking. Like you can handle a lot of weight. Don't be afraid to push those upper limits. That's for everybody though. What's number 9?
Number 9 is, this is going to be super straightforward, but to keep it simple. Keep it simple, stupid. Less is
keep it simple,
is
stupid.
more. And I feel like we've kind of alluded to this throughout this whole episode, but your training program is going to be a little boring. It's going to be a little bit repetitive. And I mean, some people will argue against that, but it's not going to be something that's always changing, always different. It shouldn't be. It should be something that you kind of know what to expect. If your training split, how you do that, how you structure that can definitely change. But the exercises and all of the principles that we have just talked about, those are going to stay the same. It doesn't matter if you're doing your squats with a dumbbell versus a barbell, if you're doing it in an upper lower split versus a push pull legs. Mm-hmm. The principles for how you should be doing those exercises, how often, it's not going to change. And that's a good thing. I think it's a good sign if you feel like it's nothing crazy. It's not always changing, always different. You don't need to spend hours in the gym at all. If you are the type of person who only has like 3 days a week, maybe you're going to spend a little bit longer in the gym versus someone who can go to the gym 6 days a week. But it's not like you have to be there for hours on end to see progress. And you don't even need to go every single day. You can be effective in going 3 to 5 days per week. If you are prioritizing, your compound exercises, compound movements, applying progressive overload, paying attention to that RPE scale, you can be in and out in 45 minutes. You don't need to be there all
if you're
all
paying
day.
attention to rest times, you can be like an effective workout. You can be in and out in 45, 50 minutes. You can even do shorter if circumstances are allowed, but like 45, 50 minutes sometimes is all you need. An hour if you're there and you're not messing around. That's all you need sometimes.
Yeah.
That's all. Yeah. But like the keep it simple thing's huge because I see so many people where honestly, and this is what I did when I was a brand new personal trainer. I was like 19 years old at 24 Hour Fitness in Lakewood, Colorado. And I think I see a lot of trainers, especially in-person trainers. I'm not calling anybody out because I used to do this, but I see this plagued in-person trainers all the time compared to online, is if you're seeing a client like 2-3 times a week in person, doing the same thing over and over again is going to make that client question like, why am I paying this dude $100 an hour to come see him? Like, can I just do this on my own? Like you taught me how to do this workout. And it causes a lot of coaches to try and get as fancy and experimental and out there as they possibly can, trying to almost like impress their client with like, oh, look at how challenging and crazy this new exercise is. You don't need like the best movements for, like we talked, like glutes, squats, hip thrusts, deadlifts, and variations of those. You don't need these crazy twisting, jumping. They have their place, but you don't need this like crazy complex system to make progress. At least I haven't seen that as much in like online coaching, because you actually get to like spend time and explain why that programming and progression works. But I saw it all the time in person. And I'm not saying every in-person trainer does this either, but because that's what I did as a younger trainer. Yeah. I was like, I just felt like I was robbing this person. They're spending $100. I'm like, I'm not going to do almost the same exact workout from last week, but just move repetitions forward and make sure they're using the same weight. That's not going to be worth their $100 an hour. Like, but simple works. Simple freaking works. It's unreal. Thou shalt keep it simple, stupid. Let's do it. The 10th commandment. Lead us there.
Is thou shalt remember not to compare thyself to others. And we've all fallen into this comparison trap. Life. You compare yourself to others in life. And sometimes it can be productive, it can to look at where am I versus maybe where are some of my role models or the people that I learn from, the people that allow me to push myself. Where are they? Can I do anything? Can I make any adjustments to work towards that? That's constructive comparison. So completely getting rid of comparison is not something I typically recommend, but people don't you always look at it that way. More people, you often find it's the comparison to self-loathing, self-deprecation. Why don't I look like that? Pitting yourself, or being very mean to yourself, or being very unrealistic with your goals based off of who you're comparing yourself to. There's a lot that goes into it, but especially now, I think in the age of influencers, right? It is very easy for people to compare themselves to the influencers, the fitness influencers they see on the internet, and not even consider the fact that this is their job. It is their job to look like that. What are you doing in your day to look the way you look? Like, are you able to spend every single day in the gym? Are you able to structure your whole day around your workout, around what you're eating? Are you able to do that? Most people are not. And so it's just kind of taking a step back and thinking about, okay, you could still have someone and like their physique and look at them as a role model, and maybe they apply good advice, but for you to expect to look exactly like someone else, that's typically just like not going to happen, especially if their job is to be a fitness influencer and you're working a 9 to 5 and you have kids or what have you. I don't care. The reality of your life has to set in a little bit and look at, is this going to be productive criticism? Am I setting goals based off of looking like someone else? Is that going to be realistic to my lifestyle? Not a lot of people think about that, and it can really take away from your success. It's a type of extrinsic motivation that doesn't drive long-term change. Again, there's a very big difference between inspiration versus comparison and it affecting how you perform. I always recommend, especially on social media, to follow people, yes, that inspire you, but maybe follow a few people that, not everyone is going to be in your exact position, but even if they account for that, like Tony and I both work from home. We both are self-employed. We're not, the average American is not in that type of environment, but it is so important for us to consider that, to factor that in, to be realistic about that. If you're a coach that is doing your online coaching full time, that's also huge. Consider your lifestyle. Be very, very, very cautious of things you do in your life, giving that instruction based off of what you're doing. Make sure you don't do that, because everyone's situation is different. And also that self-comparison can really lower your self-esteem and self-efficacy, both of which, if you have high self-esteem and high self-efficacy, are associated with increased success in all aspects of life, especially when it comes to weight loss. If you have weight loss goals, having higher self-esteem and self-confidence is going to help propel you to reaching that goal. And if you're stuck in this comparison trap, it's so not productive. And this isn't me saying just don't do it. You do it, but how you control, I keep bringing up social media because this is just nowadays, that's where you're going to find it the most. How you can control the subtle comparisons. So the comparisons you don't even realize that you're making. Like if you are constantly scrolling and it's just all girls that you don't look like and wish you did, that make you feel bad about yourself, you're not like consciously trying to think poorly, but in your subconscious you are. Okay, maybe let's limit how many of those I am seeing when I go to scroll. how often do I come off of TikTok and feel shitty about myself? Like maybe think about that and alter that environment a little bit. It's not to say that you're never not going to compare yourself. Like people do it all the time. You're a human being. That's normal.
Yeah.
How you let that affect your actions and how you view yourself on a day-to-day basis, that's what's going to be matter the most.
Because I'm like, it does give it like two sides of the coin. Like one in the training aspect of if I'm comparing myself to Russ Swole or Phil Heath, I'm going to make changes to my training program that I should not be making because I'm thinking that I should be doing what someone else that's light years ahead of me is doing, or on performance enhancing drugs or steroids. You're not in the same lane and your body's different and it's going to need something different. But then also the comparison aspect of like the mental piece of things. And it's almost like when comparison turns into jealousy almost.
Yes, that's
when it turns jealous or like you're beating yourself down, which I know we've talked about before, like just doesn't make sense logically when you think about it. Like that's what it took for me so long, is just to be like, okay, let's not be lazy and think about this logically. But it's always like people always want like his body, her money, his personality, that person's relationship. You know, it's like they're just cherry picking from each individual thing. But it's like, no, if you really want to be jealous, and this is what got me past it, is I'm like, if you really want to be jealous, logically, you can let yourself be jealous if you would be that entire person that you're jealous of that one aspect for, with that one trait that you're jealous of. If you would really trade all of what you are for all of them, their stress, their problems, their age, their health, their level of happiness, their self-image, all of their trauma, their baggage that they have for you, then I'm like, okay, that logically makes a little bit of sense to want to be like a little bit jealous or want that. But if you're not willing to do a complete 360 with that person and trade everything in your life, your relationships, your family, your friends, your job, whatever you have with that person for that one quality, it's just, there's no point to being jealous. In my head, that's how it just makes so much more sense to think that way. Because that was always at least my thing. I'm like, I always wanted to look like this person, have this person's job, this person's money. It's like, no, that doesn't make any sense. Like you're just kind of being silly with yourself. Like at that point, I almost think like you're fueling your own unhappiness at that point.
Yeah, I find this a lot with diet too. This is why I have a very love-hate relationship with what I eat in a day videos. I share what I eat in a day videos every now and then because I find that there can be so much value in getting inspiration, and especially if you are showing balanced meals, you're eating enough, you're showing easier meals, like they can be so great. I really like them. I try to add to the positivity of that space by posting them every now and then. But then you have this is what I ate to lose this amount of weight in this many days. This is how I did it. This is why this is the best way.
And then people are going to copy that directly.
Yes. Or assuming that because you eat like someone else, you're going to look like someone else. That it's just can't happen. It's impossible. You could eat exactly the same as your favorite fitness influencer and never, ever, ever look like them, because there are so many factors that could go into why this would work for someone and not work for someone else. And also just for this whole entire piece, social media is not reality. So you never know what that how completely honest are they being? I'll say this firsthand, of being very in the food, wellness, fitness space on social media for quite some time. A lot of girls lie about what they eat. A lot of girls have eating disorders and will share what I eat in a day that they don't even touch the food. So, or won't tell you that, yeah, I ate this clean all day, but I'm not going to tell you that at midnight I binge ate 2 pints of ice cream. You know what I mean?
There's just throwing shots back at the club or whatever. It's never 100% of the story.
Yeah. So it's just also taking that into account before you ever compare your diet or your habits to someone else. You're never going to you can't. It's impossible to get the full truth. It's just a part of people's lives.
That's the funniest thing I ever see. And it irks me a little bit, but it almost makes me laugh more, is when you see someone posting like, you got to eat clean, never put processed junk in their body. And then it's like you see them like private story, something else over at McDonald's or Chick-fil-A, because that stuff's okay in moderation. Yeah. But then they'll preach like you should never have this or just eat real food or do all this. And it's like, you can't be preaching one thing or this is what I eat in a day. And then just leave out the shots I took at night or the chocolate cake or the pint of ice cream, whatever. Leave that out or my cheat day. It's like, no, bro. Yeah, it can be helpful to get cool meal ideas, but I'm with you. Yeah. Love-hate relationship. But there we go. 10 training commandments. That ended up being one of my favorites that we've done in a while. That was a good one.
I like that.
A lot of context in there. So y'all heard that. If you have any questions on any of those, as always, let us know. Shoot us a DM, shoot us an email. If you want to jump on any of our complete 12-week training programs, the glute guide from last week, the upper body focused, if you want to focus more on your delts, chest, back, and arms, our full body training program, which is still my favorite to this day, our push-pull leg, all that's just for free to premium members, where it's just $5 a month to be a part of. So to all premium members, we'll see y'all on Friday for this week's AMA and supplement giveaway. Everybody else, we'll see you next Monday.